Okay, I went ahead and pulled the engine in there. I forgot to turn on the camera to record, but without this exhaust manifold, you can pretty much lower the engine sideways. Once the harmonic balancer clears here, you have enough room to turn it and then lower it down. Also makes it a lot easier to put the bolts on your engine mount without the manifold. So putting the exhaust manifold in here, it won't be that hard. You just gotta, there's plenty of room. You know, align the bolts and bolt it down. So it's kind of late today though, so I'm gonna continue this tomorrow. But pretty much at this point, I have a couple of the bell housing bolts. And that's pretty simple when you do it this way. Just angle the engine a little bit down from the back, put a jack under the transmission to raise it, and go underneath there and just look, you know, where those guide pins are. Raise it or lower it. Once it's lined up, it's gonna kind of just pop in. Since you have it in an angle, the engine's gonna want to go backwards. Once it's in, you can lower the engine and the tranny kind of together, keep them mated, and then at this point, like I said, I'm gonna do the exhaust manifold, go underneath, bolt everything up, do the back bolts, and then start putting everything back together. So it's not too bad, you know, as long as you have like an engine hoist, a good jack, things like that. Someone to help you. So Junior was helping me with, he was controlling the hoist as far as, you know, lowering it a little bit at a time, and I was guiding it. Same with the jack underneath. I done it by myself. It's a lot harder because you have to move something and then go yourself underneath and see what's going on. So if you have someone, at least someone for a few minutes here and there, that can help you a lot. So I'm gonna, tomorrow I'm gonna go ahead and continue on the bottom and then just show you putting everything back.
Music bed.
Okay, so the exhaust manifold is on here on the passenger side. Through the dipstick, just right it in here because it goes between the exhaust manifolds. So I'm gonna go down there and put it in place, and then I'll bolt it up here. I took the leveler out of here. I did one of the bolts on the bell housing for the dipstick on the transmission. That one has the bolts back there. A few of them are like this, where it's a bolt with the stud on the back, and so I still need to put the nut for the transmission dipstick on that one. That bolt goes farther in, and that also gets there's like a little bracket that holds the fuel line kind of back there, and so that gets a nut behind it. So those are done. At this point, I just gotta get underneath, and I'm gonna show you all the kind of what to button up underneath. So these are the bolts for the engine oil cooler, which are I guess this one had been replaced, but that was on there. This holds the also the cooler lines to the block, and this is what held the harness on the front of the engine. This is the gasket for the oil cooler line, so I'm gonna replace that one. And then I'm also going to install the starter, which the bolts are down there, flex plate. So I'm just going to move my starter over here. I'll probably give it a little cleaning real quick, and then I'll show you guys once I'm under there. Okay, so under the vehicle, you get your bell housing bolts here. This one has the bracket for the transmission lines here, so make sure that you put that in there. And then up here on the driver's side, there's two more that you can get from down here pretty easy. So one here, one up there. I already pushed the exhaust here into the exhaust manifolds. Those aren't all the way tight. They're just by hand. There is an O-ring on the driver's side. Now some of these engines, I think some of the 5.3s have the exhaust donut on both sides. On some of these, they have an O-ring on this side, on the driver's side, and they have a donut on the passenger side. So just make sure you match whichever exhaust flange gasket you have, and put a new one in there. What I found on the O-ring style is I have some of the copper RTV, which I usually do on the exhaust manifold flange. I put a little bit and put it on the exhaust side there to hold it in place, let it dry. Sometimes, since it goes in a little groove, with moving it in place, it falls out, and then you tighten it and it's gonna have a bad exhaust leak. So keep that in mind. I did get a new gasket, so this is the gasket that's gonna go here in the oil cooler. Gonna put that in here and put it right up here on the engine cooler. So I cleaned that one earlier when I cleaned the oil pan. This one's pretty clean. I'm just gonna wipe it, and then if you see here, this is the it's hard to get the light over here, but this is the little metal piece, and that little bolt goes right there to hold that in place. And then on the harness, that bolt that I show you on the harness, that goes way up here, actually way up here on the oil pan, and that's what holds this front harness kind of to the front of the engine. So I'm gonna go ahead and do these things here, and then I'll move over to the flex plate and the torque converter just to show you guys how that's done. Okay, so the next part here is actually I'm gonna put the dipstick in the block here. So I'm gonna go from the top and just push it down a little bit. All right, gonna have to grab it here and guide it a little bit better. So normally slice right in. It does have an O-ring in there, so maybe because of the new O-ring it's a little bit tighter than I was when I took it out. But grab it from the base down here and then just wiggle it. It already went in, so you don't want to move it from the top too much because you don't want it to you know, accidentally break. Well, maybe not accidentally if you're really tugging on it, but just be careful with it. So what we're gonna do now is bolt on the bolts on the flex plate. So flex plate's right there. Now, as you can see right now, there's no bolts or anything showing there. Let me see if I can kind of hold this flashlight there so it's better to see. So if you see the flex plate, there's no holes. So what I'm gonna do is I have a socket here, 24 millimeter crank pulley here on the front, and I'm just gonna turn this. Now it's gonna be a little bit tight because I have spark plugs and everything on it. If you don't have your spark plugs in, it makes it a lot easier to turn the engine over, but we already put that on. So what happens is when I turn the engine over, you'll see the flex plate it's turning because, well, it's connected. So you want that hole right there. You'll see it, I'm gonna say right around that area is where you want it. Now if you installed everything correctly, It's gonna be hard to get my hand in there, but let me see if I can do this with one hand. So hopefully you can see, but if you do everything correctly, you should be able to reach in here and turn that torque converter with your hand enough so that you can match the bolts. Now I'm gonna put you guys down and turn it, because with you on the way I can't see where the bolt hole is. But... okay, so I was able to put the flashlight here. So you see I turned the flex plate, and now you can see the threads for the torque converter there. So you should be able to reach in there with your bolt and tighten it up. So once that is set, it's a 15mm socket that fits on the outside of these bolts. I'm gonna put a small extension on there, and I'll probably have to move the flashlight now, but to just tighten it up to specs right there. You have to look, I'm not sure. I know the flex plate to the block bolts were like 70 some foot-pounds. I don't remember exactly what these were, so I'll have to look them up. But look them up for whatever model you're doing for your engine, and then you can tighten them up right here. The other option is for you to do a hex. So the center of those bolts is a hex. Usually a hex is gonna give you a little bit more room. So if you need to do that, you know, just use a good hex. You don't want to break it or anything. But so I'm gonna tighten that one, and then you'll just turn your crank with the with the ratchet up front, and do all three. So in this one there's 3 of them. Like I said, some of the 2500, some of the other transmissions have 4 bolts, but this is gonna have 3 of those, and then I'll show you once I'm all done. Okay, so I got all 3 torque converter bolts tightened up. At this point I connected the crankshaft position sensor, the other knock sensor here, and I am ready to put the starter in. So both the power and the signal for the starter right there. So ready to put that on there. Remember to connect that crankshaft sensor before putting the starter, because the starter is going to be on the way. So if you don't do it now, you'll have to take the starter back out to connect it. So it has the 2 long bolts, so you just kind of hold it in place, line up the bolts, tighten it up. Normally on these engines there's little covers to go after the starter here, but this one is missing them. So after you put the starter, there's like a little plastic cover that would go with the bolt to the oil pan there. One on the other side. This one does not have it, so I'm not gonna put that on there, but pretty much. And then I tightened up the exhaust manifold bolts, so you see those are all tightened up on both sides. So I'm gonna be done with pretty much everything down here underneath the vehicle once I put the starter on. Okay, so what I did next, I finished the bell housing bolts, put the dipstick bolt right here on the side. There's a ground right over here behind this power steering bracket, so don't forget that. And then I started to put the power steering bracket, so I have the bolt there at the bottom. There's 1, 2, 3 more bolts that go all the way through, so there's total 4 on that one. But before I do that, since this is kind of on the way, I just left this side. I'm gonna install the intake. I also did the AC compressor. So this bracket goes on with 2 bolts, and then there is 4 bolts for the compressor to the bracket. This would be a good time to put your belt on. Put it all the way to the back here of the crank pulley. Put it around your compressor pulley. Start it here on top as far as you can, and then turn this crank pulley a little bit, and just kind of keep your hand here. Don't let it pinch you, but just pull the belt so it's straight, because when you turn it, it's going to want to go in, since it's not in on this side, right? So just kind of pull it towards the front, you know, as you're turning it, and then it's going to snap in place. There's a special tool you can get which pretty much does the same thing, but this is a stretch fit belt, so there's no tensioner on it. So like I said, now I'm gonna get my intake manifold, which is right over here. I'm gonna put the new gaskets. Those clip onto the bottom of it, so when you put the new gaskets, the old ones aren't in here, but they do clip to the bottom of the intake. I'm gonna give this a little cleaning and then put this on there, since everything else is pretty much done, and then I can finish the front and start doing all the connections here for the injectors and all that, and then we can move into the coils, and then we can do water pump and all that. Alrighty, so got the intake all bolted on there, torque to spec, and then I went ahead and put the harness back. You know, the nice thing, I had it on top, just pretty much placed it down, bolted down, run the cables or wires, connected everything. Don't forget this ground right up front here, and then connected everything on this side. I went ahead and installed the water pump, and I did the water pump before the power steering bracket, although you could do either way, but I just had a little bit more extra room for the bolts here to line them up with this kind of out of the way. So I would suggest doing the water pump and then the bracket. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts here on the front, the one on the side, so don't forget that one. And then I went ahead and plugged in the fuel line and the evap line that's back there. So now what I have to do is pretty much at this point is get the radiator back in here, bolt it down, get the fans, run all the hoses, and then just the alternator right up here, but that one's easy. The harness for the alternator is over here, so I can just run it this way now, but not the harness, I guess, but the power cable, because the plug is on this other harness here. But this connects to the positive terminal of the alternator, and that just goes across from that side. I will have to connect the vapor line there, so don't forget that little one there. But I'm gonna get my radiator, put it on there, and then I'll show you guys after. And then last thing I can do before or after, but it's the coils bolted down on each side, and then just run the spark plug wire. So I might do that first because I have more room to kind of hop in the engine bay here, get those bolted down. Once I have the radiator and fans in here, I can't really like get up here that easy. So I'm gonna do the coils, radiator, fans, and then hoses. All right, so I got everything all bolted back on: radiator, fans, hoses, alternator. On the alternator, there's this little metal bushings in here. When you take it off, you can give them a little tap with the hammer, just that way when you go to put it back on there, it's not so tight. It just falls in, and then once you tighten it, those bushings go back tight in there. So I'm just filling the oil now. Make sure you don't start it without oil. Normally on these engines, they don't have like a, something you can prime them like the old school engines. So one thing that you can do before the intake, I forgot to mention, the oil pressure sensor is right on top over there. Before you put that on in the little filter, you can put some oil through there, maybe like half a quart. That usually fills the passage from there to the oil filter to the oil pump. So at least that gets quite a bit of oil in there. There's a way that you can pressurize the system and prime it. But I don't have those tools, so I'm gonna finish filling the oil. I just need one more quart and then some coolant, check for leaks, and then start it up. All right, so engine running, everything sounds good, no leaks. I already let it warmed up. fans turned on and everything, so everything looks good. I'm gonna just really clean up my mess here and take it for a nice drive, but so far so good. It has good oil pressure. Right now it's showing about 37. 33 pounds of pressure, which is now warm 34. I know the other engine, it was making a noise and the pressure would be about 19, so that's a big difference. And so, you know, maybe it's just worn out, but other than that, I mean, it's running good. That is pretty much it. I'm gonna actually shut it off now, let it do a heat cycle. So when I put a new engine, I like to warm it up and then just kind of, you know, shut it down, let it kind of warm up, have a heat cycle, then I'll start it again and drive it. But so far so good. That is how you change one of these LS engines. And like I said, this is a 6.2, but it's the same for a 4.8, 5.3, 6.0, pretty much the same process. If you need to exchange yours out, you can get a reman for a decent price nowadays and just do it that way. This engine was rebuilt a few years back, but from day one, it was making that noise. I don't know if it was a bottom end. I don't know what the really... We might kind of look into it and see what it was, but it was sent off to a machine shop. Heads were done, crank was done. They checked everything. It was all assembled, brand new components. It ran good. Don't get me wrong, like it ran good, but it had a small noise that would come and go. So I don't know. It's not something that was catastrophic that, you know, it would have blown up, because it was like that from day one, and it's been probably like 4 years that it's been done. Maybe at least three and a half years that it's been running that way. And it's just, that's just how it was, you know. It's a little bit of noise. Maybe the pistons were too loose. I did ask the machine shop if I needed to buy oversized pistons, and they said no, it was good. But I don't know what really happened. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one.